Developing on the cloud is complex. What if you could use your existing programming knowledge to build, deploy, and manage cloud infrastructure using your favorite languages and tools? Pulumi is a cloud engineering platform that lets you write infrastructure as code in any programming language and on any cloud platform. If you're an Azure fan like me, then you'll love Pulumi's integrations with the Microsoft ecosystem. You can use .NET to define infrastructure from your favorite IDE like Visual Studio and deploy with Pulumi's CLI or with CI/CD like Azure DevOps. Pulumi uses the same APIs as Azure Resource Manager, so you get access to all of Azure's capabilities. Plus, it's open source. Get started with Pulumi for free today at pulumi.com. That's PULUMI.com. Hi, I'm Scott Hanselman. This is another episode of Hansel Minutes. Today I'm chatting with Brittany Greenfield. She's the CEO and founder of Wabbi, and they deliver AppSec infrastructure and enterprise DevOps. How are you?
Doing great today, Scott. Thanks for having me.
So I'm feeling pretty good as a small business owner, as Hanselman International, which consists of a number of websites. I'm feeling pretty good about myself that I've set up DevOps pipelines. I've got some in Azure DevOps. I've got some in GitHub Actions, but a lot of organizations just don't. They're still deploying from, Anna's laptop in the corner, and that's straight to production.
Yeah. It's, I don't think this is anything that's unique to small businesses, large businesses. DevOps is so much about not just a technical transformation, but a philosophical transformation. And it's a lot harder to get out of I'm going to ship twice a year into quarterly release cycles or monthly release cycles. Some say we're shipping, I think it's, a third of companies are shipping daily. And, that takes a lot of organizational inertia that you have to overcome to be able to say we're actually doing DevOps. And I think the other important thing about DevOps is it's not just about speed. It's why I really actually hate using that stat, they're shipping daily. It's about efficiency. And, I think there's a generation out there that said it's just about shipping code fast. No, it's about shipping code correctly and efficiently and fixing things at the right time. So, I think that's the next generation of DevOps that we're going to start seeing soon.
Interesting. I've heard people use that stat and talk about the idea WordPress ships 11 times a day. I'm like, I don't know if that's a good thing or not.
It depends on the company, right? For some companies, it's about continually delivering new features to market and fixing stuff later. And that's fine depending on an industry, but other industries don't have that risk tolerance. So you have to find what works for you and how DevOps aligns with your overall business risk strategy. I rail on Facebook a lot. They popularize move fast and break things. And I'm known for saying it's not about moving fast and breaking things. It's moving efficiently and fixing things at the right time. And I think we're starting to see that pendulum swing back.
I have felt that the thing that DevOps added a lot to my small business and to the bigger products that I work on in my day job is a sense of confidence in the product. And the way I like to phrase it is before we had fear-driven development, where we would literally not change some code because we live in fear of that section of the code. Do you think that folks that are not enabling DevOps and then SecDevOps that we'll talk about a little later are not doing that, not just because of organizational willpower or inertia, but because of legitimate fear of their code base?
Yes, absolutely. I think everybody's, the older you are, the more skeletons are in your code closet. And, I think that is certainly a hindrance. You have to be willing to say, we're going to open up the kimono on this and see what's in there. And so that way we can make forward progress, because you just can't live in this waterfall state of development and remain competitive. For some companies, that's probably fine. And, they may be driven a little bit more by compliance. Not that we don't all have to do compliance, but that's a little bit of a low bar. So, it really just it goes to some organizations saying good enough is good enough versus how can we continually improve? And that's where you see that line in the sand.
Do you think that that having a good DevOps pipeline, a healthy and mature DevOps pipeline, necessarily precludes being in waterfall? Like, do they have to be agile? Can't you do
Absolutely not. I really think what we're seeing companies move towards is, if we want to play buzzword bingo, agile fall, right? And
I've heard Scrummer fall.
Oh, Scrum or Fall. I'm going to have to use that one too. Yes, we're still going to sort of focus our efforts in 2-week sprints or whatever our cycle is, but we're going to still have a concentrated release. And that allows you to balance the speed of innovation with still having those checks in place, which I think is what DevOps is really about. How can we have a system of checks and balances and align it with what our goals are?
Mm-hmm. So I've got my DevOps platform going. I think a decent number of people are doing DevOps. They have more trust within DevOps. Of course, there's testing and regular testing. But what your company focus on is secure DevOps or SecDevOps. What does that mean?
Yeah, it's just for us really an evolution of DevOps to say it's security like QA needs to just be baked into the process, and there are different steps you have to take. Again, no different than QA. And so we help them say, here's what you have to do now. You could joke it's digestible security. Let's not try to boil the ocean and implement every control at once, but say, here's the right set. And that's really what secure DevOps is about, is having a security mindset when you deploy your DevOps.
How important is the relationship that the developers have with the security department? Sometimes I've worked at companies where I wouldn't say that they're not nice people, but there's just an intensity there. And it ends up being the devs don't care and the security people are too intense. And it seems like that's not sustainable.
It is. It's not sustainable. It is really important. And, I think so many other aspects of security they live in this like black and white world, right? Bad, stop it. Your antivirus doesn't pop up on your computer and go, this is bad-ish. Would you like me to maybe stop it? And development lives in this world of, what's good enough and what can we fix later, right? Sort of perfection being the enemy of productivity. And, that's where I think that friction comes from, where, security really is trying to meet. This year alone has proven how complex security's job is. And I think that they get a bad rap. They end up turning into being like the Grim Reapers. Security showed up. Who did something wrong? So, some of this being able to have security meet development where they are, both literally and philosophically, is really important to the success of security being deployed as part of DevOps.
Now, I've read some articles that you've written, and in one of them, you said that you believe in everybody-led security. Mm-hmm. What does that mean? Because there were other techniques of security, developers leading and others.
Yeah, so if everybody isn't going in with a security-focused mindset, two things happen. One, you just shift the bottleneck to other places. Developer-led security has been, that was what my comment was really in response to. It's been a top of mind and it's the latest trend. But we have unit testing and QA, but we still have QA engineers, right? What we can engage developers with, we do, but we're asking them to take on a lot of different roles and not giving them extra bandwidth to do what their job is, which is write the code. If you, again, don't take this everybody-led approach where, security's job is to set the security strategy, development's job is to ship code on time, on budget, on spec, and security has to be a piece of that, you're just giving somebody else the problem. That's why I believe it's everybody-led security. I think the other, buzzline is, security is everybody's responsibility, which is true. However, it's also to everybody's benefit when you get over that siloed approach to saying, those security guys sit in the corner and they're responsible for making sure we don't get broken into. It's not my job.
Mm-hmm. There's so many things to have to remember, though, and sometimes that's why we have specialists, right? They remember everything. Is the point of a secure DevOps pipeline that it remembers everything? It remembers the policies that I don't have to?
It remembers the policies and allows people to make educated decisions, right? This isn't something specific to DevOps. It's we need information so we can make educated decisions in all of our jobs. And so that's really what the idea of secure DevOps is as I said before, that bite-sized security. What do you need to know right now? And what do I, as a security team member, an architect, or a PM, need to know about what you've just done that's related to security? That's really what SecDevOps is about, and how you can successfully deploy security as part of it and let it guide you.
And within the topic of security, there's compliance and policies. And another article you wrote, you called compliance things I have to do so I don't get in trouble or spend
Yes.
3 hours with an auditor, which is kind of that antagonistic relationship we have with, I just want to write code, but I have to think about all these different things and accessibility. And of course, security is just like, there's another thing I got to do.
It is. And, I think that's been back to that cultural component. That's really been the challenge of security trying to merge in or marry into the DevOps culture, is that the increase in release cycles and just complexity of how people are building code, when it's no longer, hey, I've got my code and I'm zipping it up and emailing it to somebody else. It's created almost sort of this infinite number of permutations of questions that have to be answered to say, is it good enough to ship? And that's, again, back to your point, when we can provide the right information and not make them say, what questions do I need to ask, but ask the questions for them and tell them the answers. That's how we can actually enable development to take ownership of security, really, and let it be development-led, supported with security as that strategic backbone rather than their babysitter.
And that brings up the idea of scaling. Everyone's trying to scale, trying to ship more often. And you've said that talent can't scale. People don't scale. We want them to be 10x more productive. We seem to think that means work harder, work more hours. The DevOps pipeline is an opportunity for my people to scale without having to work more hours.
Exactly. Right. That's where the power of automation is. Think about, the success stories we've seen with robotics. It's about letting humans work on what they're good at. Tough problems to solve. So for, engineers, that's writing the code. How do I write the best code to meet this outcome? Let's take away what's my schedule that I need to follow, or what's the policy for this specific type of data I'm dealing with, and, and let them focus on what their job is. And that's how people become more productive, not let's give them more things to do.
So this term DevOps is newish. I am of a certain age that I apparently was doing DevOps 20 years ago and not realizing it when we set up a continuous, build server. We had called them build servers. And then once you make a build server, you're like, oh gosh, if the computers are good at doing things repetitively, maybe it should do testing, maybe it should do other stuff. That got the name DevOps. And now we're trying to figure out, where does the word sec, where does sec for security belong? Is it SecDevOps? Is it DevOpsSec?
So I would argue that there actually shouldn't be, despite the fact that we say we're SecDevOps. I'd argue that the word sec should just be built into DevOps, right? The same way that, essentially DevOps will just be development in another 5 years. I'm willing to bet that starts to disappear too. And so it should be every place, right? You start your project by defining your requirements. Well, why isn't security part of that? You then go to write code and you have functional requirements you need to test that against, and you need to actually, meet your feature spec on, well, security needs to be part of that too. And, security ends up signing off on that. And, we really say all these security components are just variations of development components. Vulnerabilities, well, that's just your security portion of your technical debt that you have to fix within some reasonable time that's based on an overall risk profile you're willing to take. And so, that's why I say right now we call it out as something different, because we're still early in the adoption curve about how people actually integrate security into their pipeline. But our goal, our mission is to get rid of all three of those: SecDevOps, DevSecOps, and DevOpsSec.
Right. So the development process and the tools in security, all is just a normal part of the development lifecycle.
Correct. Exactly.
Okay. So then where does things like penetration testing, where you get humans trying to break in, does that fit into an automated world? Can you automate things like that?
No, but I think you can automate how the results get ingested, right? There's still going to be, this goes back to humans are great at not just saying, let me write code to go do vulnerability scanning, but let me go pretend I'm an adversary. So let them go do that. And we actually have clients where we ingest their penetration test results and prioritize it in their backlog. And it gets to more, you mentioned this before, right? Sort of let the process just make these decisions for you. Yes, I care about this particular pen test result coming back, and we're going to fix that. No, I actually don't care about that because we have other mitigating controls in place. And so again, it makes it more effective as part of a comprehensive application security program.
And then what about things like threat modeling, which sometimes fits, very early on in the process, but then gets forgotten later?
Exactly. I think threat modeling is important for everybody to practice. Um, you know, uh, Doing it for every project at the beginning of every release or whatnot isn't necessarily practical. Well, you can spend forever threat modeling, right? And but however, if you instill that mindset over time, just whether it's through the threat modeling cards or just hey, we're going to sit down and take an exercise on this, so people start to get into that mindset, that's where it really becomes helpful on it. I do think, I almost reverse threat modeling. It is worth saying what are the security implications of some of the decisions I'm going to make as well, and that again goes to security's got to be present in every step of the development lifecycle.
Let's face it, your code is going to have errors, and even code written by an amazing developer such as yourself, errors do happen. But it's nice to know that Honey Badger has your back. Honey Badger makes you a DevOps hero by combining error monitoring, uptime monitoring, and check-in monitoring into a single easy-to-use platform. They send you alerts in real time with all the context needed to see what's causing the error and where it's hiding, so you can quickly fix it and get on with your day. Honey Badger's included uptime and cron monitoring also lets you know when your external services are having issues or your background jobs go missing or silently fail. Go to honeybadger.io and discover how Star, Josh, and Ben created a 100% bootstrapped monitoring solution. Why is that important? Well, self-funding means that they only answer to you, the developer, and not some venture capital overload. Check them out at honeybadger.io. That's honeybadger.io. So security should be present in every step of the development lifecycle, but sometimes people mark these things as a line item and a non-functional requirement. It's kind of like off there, but you disagree with that.
Yeah, correct. I mean, it's got to be managed as its own bucket within in the development life cycle. You can't just say there are some security requirements or vulnerabilities that come back and you go, I never need to fix that because I have another mitigating control. And so that's fine. But if you're going to manage security, you have to manage it no differently than you manage the rest of your backlog. And so to just toss it into that non-functional requirements bucket is like, it's like saying security is carbon monoxide. You can't, if you put it into the corner, it's just going to slowly eat away at your budget, at your delivery schedules, potentially at your job. And you've got to start being proactive about it because those things creep up on you as we see.
Mm-hmm. So with the advent of the cloud, with serverless, with breaking things up, so the monolith, while it does exist in some places still historically, isn't as common. Is it more challenging now to secure things that are in, like, my app is in 15 places?
Yes, for sure. Exactly. Right. Because you have to understand, and it doesn't all have to be automated testing. Good old fashioned manual attestation works just as well, but you need to know which applications you care about taking the extra time to test on. It does become harder to secure. Flip side is there's a security tool for everything out there. But if you don't incorporate that into a comprehensive program, that's just going to be data and no information. And that's where enterprises start to go turn off the spigot and security gets a bad name.
Does serverless make this more challenging?
No. We take the approach that, you've got to be completely agnostic to methodology, both on the AppSec and DevOps side. And, there's going to become a set of controls for it, serverless, and there will eventually become testing tools for serverless. And again, if you have a program, you just have to find the right place to plug that in and you'll continue to evolve. I think there was an early generation of DevSecOps tools and they focused on, here's what common configurations are. And it made people lock into methodology rather than saying, we're going to grow and evolve with you. And that's, again, where we just haven't gotten this adoption, this maturity yet in security being part of the DevOps.
So once we have maturity where we understand what best practices are, we will bake those best practices into segments within our DevOps pipeline. Help me understand where Wabbi tools fit in, because there are lots of continuous integration and continuous deployment systems, GitHub Actions, Jenkins, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Where do your tools fit in? Like, is it inverted? Are you a pipeline of your own, or are you a piece of my existing pipeline?
We're really the AppSec pass layer in your tech stack, in your DevOps tech stack. So we're not actually doing any of the testing ourselves. What we're doing is we're orchestrating and automating the program. So if you have policies, we share the policies in the IDE, or we can block code from being committed back into the branch if the policy hasn't been followed. Okay. We can prioritize the vulnerabilities or the pen test results as they come in the context, not just of that company, but in the context of that application. You can imagine an availability vulnerability comes back on a bill pay platform. That's treated than if it comes back on a trading platform, right? Your risk tolerance is greater than just your cyber risk tolerance. It's about your business risk tolerance. And then, what we ultimately get to go is say, this meets the security standards or it doesn't. And here's who needs to sign off on it or not. But where we really see our value is, it's easy to talk about those tactical things, is if we think about here, I'm going to toss out another, buzzy word, CI/CD, right? Continuous integration, continuous deployment. And, philosophically, it's about being able to make frictionless changes. So you're always delivering the best code. And what we really do is give you the continuous security component of that, so that as those changes occur, this current security standards are always being pushed out, and security can start being more adaptive to the environment around them, right? Yeah. SolarWinds happens. You want to tell me that people didn't suddenly change their policies, right? How do you know, though, what applications you need to do it and in what order you do that? And so Wabbi would have managed that.
Nice. Yeah, you've got a great quote on your website that says, "A checklist is not a gatekeeper."
Correct.
Many, many years ago, I used to say, Word documents don't break the build.
Right. And I got to tell you, there are so many companies out there, and I'm not saying this to shame them, just so that they know it's okay. People are trying to move out of those checklists. And because of that, so much of that noise from that first generation of DevSecOps tools, they just find themselves relying more and more on their Excel spreadsheets rather than trying to do it. And so much of it also becomes institutional knowledge, not just, hey, did you use a password? That's the policy. But did you actually use the right kind of password? Because if I'm dealing with PII, well, if it's just email, all of our emails are out there, right? Yeah. But if it's actually sensitive information, you probably want some different cryptography on it.
Yeah. You point out that security requirements often get stuck in checklists, or they're waiting for a person to click approve. And even at my company, in my day job, which is one of the most sophisticated companies in the world for creating software, often there's so-and-so's on vacation. They need to do a security pass.
Right.
Or whatever. Right. If you have automated governance, then teams don't have to wait.
Exactly. And there's a backup. And, those are all the pieces of an application security program that says, okay, here's what happens when this happens. And, those things happen every day. They're completely repeatable actions. How can we take people from having to do the grunt work of it, and again, let them stay focused on their job so they can keep shipping code, whatever their timeline is?
So I'm hearing you say that you're believing in security policies as code, and as something that can really be declared programmatically, because if a policy is in an email somewhere, who's going to read it?
Yes and no. Correct. Right. If a policy is in an email, right. One of the other quotes I think on the website, right. If a policy is in an email and nobody ever reads it, is it even a policy? Right. Yeah. So, if a policy is in an email, now the other side of that is where I say it's not like code. So it can be programmatized, but you also need to program for the exceptions to that. That we're not always, let's just go back to DevOps, right? We make decisions about what the right configuration is, or what the right way to write a piece of code is. And there's not one right answer to that. Sometimes there's not one right answer to a policy. Policies sort of take a broad stroke view to say, oh, you always have to have a 15-minute timeout. Well, if you're doing a batch import, that's probably not going to work, or something like that, right? That's a simplistic view. And so we need to be able to programatize not just the policies, but how you actually manage the exceptions to it.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I think that as a programmer, I want everything to be code
Right.
and be able to compile everything. But I'm hearing you say that really it's about automating the boring parts, automating the political parts, automating the policy parts, so that there are gatekeepers that aren't necessarily humans. They are agreed upon policies that we
Mhm.
as a company, we're using our organizational willpower to make our DevOps pipeline fundamentally more secure than it would be if we'd done nothing.
Right, exactly. It's I often say it's the contract between security and development.
Hmm.
Okay, you wanted to, security has set their standards, right? The laws, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And development says, I want to develop an application with these design attributes, and security goes, great, here are your requirements. And we all know contracts are about managing when something goes wrong, right? If everything always went right, you wouldn't need a contract. So it's about providing those parameters to say, well, if you're not going to follow this, here's who needs to sign off on it. Or when this kind of vulnerability is reported, here's the process that has to get kicked off.
Mm-hmm.
Or when the code reviewer is on vacation, here's who the backup is, right? If he doesn't sign off in 24 hours. So that's sort of where we believe the future of application security as part of this very dynamic pipeline really is moving.
Do you think if the tool is good enough or if the tool fits into the company enough that can itself help change the culture?
Absolutely. But, we always, this, right? You've been developer for your entire career. You got to start with people, then process, then tools. Tools can't fix the first two. Okay. And I think sometimes, and that's where application security has been a little tough, and it is a little different than some of the other security tools, is that, again, it's got to be deployed as part of an overall process. And I think that you can actually have great application security without a single tool. Now, it may not be scalable, right? It may not be robust, but if you say, I'm going to do these things and I know when I did them and when I didn't do them, that could be a firewall configuration or a cloud configuration, and somebody just manually attests to it, then you can really get started with an application security program. And I think it also means that you don't have to be a Fortune 500 company to have a good, robust application security program.
That's a great point. Back to my original idea where I am the head of my tiny company of exactly one people, the power that the cloud and a DevOps pipeline gives me, it does make me feel like I have a team.
Right.
If I'm asleep and I'm getting pull requests from tools that are telling me that there are security vulnerabilities, if I decide to ship the build to production overnight on a Friday, mm-hmm. and it got kicked back because it wasn't compliant, that makes me feel like people are working for me.
Yeah, exactly. It's and that's very much the approach. It's funny. I actually say we're the AppSec angel on their shoulder. We're helping guide the development team. Here's what you need to do. And we're doing that a lot for them, right? We're sort of holding them by the hand and then saying, here's now the thing you have to do, right? The build's getting kicked back because of a vulnerability that hasn't been fixed. Now this is your job to go fix it. I think everybody needs that. We can't if we could all be experts in everything, we would be, but we're not. And especially with the ratio is something like for every 100 developers and 10 ops people, there's just one application security person. And they can't be every place at once. So you need to find a way to direct their attention to the most strategic needs, but not ask these developers and ops people to suddenly become security experts either.
Right. Or suddenly ask them to work double the time.
Correct.
and scale, because we've proven before at the beginning of the conversation, no, people can't scale like that. This is about letting the computers do the work.
Right. Even your best, most productive person has to sleep at some point and go to the bathroom, right?
Yeah. So where would people start, though? I think that there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of overwhelming information. If you go and just Google for DevOps or SecDevOps, you're going to find a ton of stuff, and it's hard to separate the wheat from the chaff.
Yeah, I would say people, I don't think you necessarily need to go Google, right, first. I would actually say, look inside and say most organizations have some of this built out one way or another. You know what the attributes are that you're categorizing your projects by.
Right.
Some basic level of standard that you want to meet. It could be the exact same standard for every other project. Mm-hmm. And, I think that's if you sort of see what you have already and what base you have, and how you can align in your product strategy, your security strategy, and just the information you have, that's the best place. And for all the jokes I made about Excel, toss it into an Excel document. It just that you have the institutional knowledge. And then, say we're going to scan once a week or whatever our schedule is. And it's like going to the gym. You have to just set goals for yourself and make sure you're actually doing them. And then you'll start to get insights into your business. Okay, well, when we scan more often, we actually have fewer vulnerabilities we have to fix over time because we take care of them and start to look at that productivity gain from just adding on simple steps.
I like that analogy, though, that you just gave me, which I think could be extended because I love taking analogies just way too far. If you just roll into the gym and you're like, all right, everybody, what are we doing here?
Right.
What's the plan? Right? I Googled, I found this gym, and here I am. Really, you have to sit down and be introspective. You have to ask yourself, what's missing in my life? What's missing in my pipeline? What's missing in my organization?
Right.
And writing that stuff down and then having a plan and then going and saying, will this tool, will this philosophy, fill the gap that we have identified here at the company?
Yeah, exactly. And I have a shared love of analogies, so I'll carry on with it. But, you show up at the gym and you have 5,000 pieces of equipment. Do you actually know what to do with them? And if you don't have that plan beforehand and you know what your goal is, you're going to show up and be overwhelmed by it. And I think that's some of the challenge and why I actually discourage people from, going down the DevSecOps hairball route first and focus on the people and the process, because otherwise you're just going to buy all these tools and it's going to create a lot of noise for you. And it's going to kill your program before it ever gets off.
Yeah, definitely. The road to DevOps is paved with good intentions.
Yes, for sure.
Trying to get people to go and do this kind of stuff is really challenging. It's frustrating when I'll meet with big companies and I'll find out that, again, they're deploying from someone's laptop or that they have, mediocre source control. Doing builds locally is a nightmare. And then trying to do security in that same way would be asking for trouble.
Correct. Exactly. I mean, think about when you get a new employee, how hard it is to make sure they're up to date on, LastPass and antivirus. Now let's extrapolate that to where we're writing our code.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much, Brittany Greenfield, for chatting with me today.
Thanks so much for having me, and pleasure, and looking forward to the next time.
You can check out Wabbi at wabbisoft.com. That's wabbisoft.com. This has been another episode of Hansel Minutes, and we'll see you again next week.